I'm Brian Foster, and today I'm talking about Spiritism. And we are going through on chapter 10, titled An Explanation Through the Mist. Before we begin, let's have a short prayer. Dear Jesus, please allow us, the human collective on this planet, to move forward to a planet of regeneration, to a higher vibrational level. Please allow our governments to be fair and for the people, not to focus solely on staying in power and creating more power for themselves, and to allow free and fair elections so people who have higher spiritual maturity may someday lead us into a better vibrational state. Amen. And also, before I begin this chapter, if you are interested in Spiritism, please read my free PDF, Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. And you can get that on nwspiritism.com. Now, Spiritism was codified to us by Allan Kardec, who wrote the Spirit's Book. And you can find that free on PDF. But a kind of an overview that you can read and to understand before you read the 1,019 questions answered by spirits as organized by the Spirit of Truth, as promised by Jesus in the New Testament, I recommend you might want to download my free PDF, Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. It's on my site. It's also in French. And also, if you'd like, it's in Kindle, paperback, and in Audible format. So let's start on chapter 10. And it's called An Explanation. So let's go back for those who haven't seen the previous chapter. So a spirit who really wished to be named nameless, although some people called him Fred, so that's probably his first name. And he was a very nice man. He died in the late 19th century. He tried to rescue a child who was stuck in the middle of a road, and this is before the automobile. And he rushed to the middle of the road, and he and the child were killed by being run over by carriages. They never felt a thing. They woke up on this grassy knoll in heaven. So, and these chapters been about his first days in heaven. And then he had went to this kind of secluded place and talked to this woman, and it was all about her trying to recover from her time in the lower zone, the dark abyss, where she kind of set herself up to be in a very dark place, because when she was alive, she had this really good friend, and then she went out with this boy, and they were kind of both competing, but then he asked her first, and she just tried to string him along, said no, and then he thought that was the final word, and he went and married her other friend. She vowed revenge. Well, she finally found out where they lived. She took the husband away, and this is from a wife and kids. This is back in the probably 1800s, which was a very not thing to do. And then she died when he was still alive, and then she went into a dark place, and she felt terrible because she had done terrible things. She'd taken away from her friends. She'd broken up a family. She'd disgraced her family. So I will now carry on where we are in the book. So I have a vivid recollection of the fearful enjoyment and nervous bravery with which, as a child, I hunted for curios washed up by the incoming tide, paddling with my naked feet in the fluctuating waters on the sea beach. I have no doubt but I accomplished the whole gamut of childless heroics in my adventures, and I'm sure there were interludes of surprisingly rapid recessions as my watchful eye caught sight of some advancing wave, calculated to reach out its arms a few inches beyond its predecessor. Hope and fear, success and failure, pleasure and disappointment irregularly alternated in my experience until, drenched with spray and cold, my guardian carried me away from the scene of my exploits with scarcely sufficient treasure in my possession to convict me of petty larceny. It was an analogous experience through which I passed at this stage of my new life, meaning his new life in heaven. I was again beside the sea, the infinite sea of spirit life. Wave after wave of revelation was rolling in, breaking upon the rocks of my ignorance, and drenching me with a blinding spray of knowledge. The mighty force, the rapid succession, the bewildering unfoldment, left me no time to appropriate the treasures which were continuously, and but for the moment, laid open to my view. Strange and unexpected objects were almost hastily brought before me. Revelations of sight, touch, and hearing came upon me like a flood, and I could only stand confused, confounded, and perplexed before the mighty force which surrounded, enveloped me. And this is quite, a typical view of heaven for many people who are intellectually curious. They just want to learn everything at once. Of course, it's too much. And the spirits tell them, slow down, concentrate on one thing at a time. But it's just such a wonderful world. Now, I'll carry on what he said. I had been told it was love, all love, and I should be presently able to understand and appreciate it. But now I was like a lad thrown into the water, unable to swim. The force of the waves and the tide were against me. I tried to profit by the instruction I had received, but in my inexperience and lack of power of immediate appropriation, I found it more natural to flounder and aimlessly battle with the storm, which threatened to engulf me, alternately hoping and almost doubting the result. And again, this is where people, we're on earth and we feel, many times we feel alone. We don't feel connection with people. And a good part of that is because we feel, when you are coming to the earth and you come from heaven, now if you're from the lower zone, it's quite normal, but if you're coming from heaven, you have this overall feeling of love and connectedness. And because of the law of affinity, puts other people with you, the people you like, the people you love, and you're surrounded in an atmosphere of love. In fact, that is why higher angels reflect, and they look fuzzy to us, because they don't emanate light. They reflect the love that is in, around, and permeates through everybody. And therefore, it's kind of hard to see them. Now, if you were on their same level, you would see them normally. But being higher, that's why they look like angels, because the light comes out and it looks like they have wings. Now, some people can have wings in heaven, but it's something that I think that happens more of when people cannot focus on a higher spirit. And the whole background is love. Think how lucky we are to be in a universe created by God that is permeated with love. And of course, that is why when you're in heaven and you still have some character flaws that you want to fix, that's why you need to be incarnated on earth. You can fix them in heaven or the lower zone or other places, but it's so much harder, especially if you're in heaven, because in heaven, you're not going to have deep introspection. You're in the earth, which was this simulation of a physical life for us, was created especially for us to be vulnerable to waves of emotion. Here he's having waves of knowledge come over him. So he didn't say waves of, he didn't say like I was scared or anxious. He just said he had this waves of knowledge. He just couldn't keep up. He just loved it. Now on earth, it's the opposite. You've got waves of emotions. You've got 1,000 different distractions happening to you at one time. I mean, Socrates said, you can't ever use your mind here because there's things always distracting you. And so, but in heaven, it is a wonderful place. So it's hard to tear out some of these primitive emotions you still think that you may have. On earth, you will be given trials and tribulations in which they will expose those emotions, and you can analyze them and take them out. And sometimes it can be painful. And as spirits say, pain is the great teacher. But they don't mean it as punishment. It is all edification. Okay, let me carry on. Such was candidly my attitude for a brief period of time, of which I am speaking. Without opportunity for reflections, events of such an unexpected and previously considered impossible character were being so rapidly unfolded before me, that with a nature prone to doubt and full of dismal forebodings, such as mine was, in the physical life, it was too much for me to reach so near the perfect ideal as to view the developments of my instructions with feelings of equanimity and calm confidence. So he was just like, it was too wound up. Okay, now this is where also, again, he's just putting, his finger right on it. There is a general idea of mankind that by the simple process of dying, we are translated into a condition of omnipotence and solve every problem in the twinkling of an eye. It was with a sense of deepest gratitude that I discovered the fallacy of such teaching. And the wider my experience ranges, the more astounded I am that this preposterous assumption could ever have been originated. are found as sanctioned in the minds of intelligent human beings. Every single question I asked, every scene I beheld, every sound I heard had its own special revelation to make, and the rapidity which each successive wave of information rolled over me allowed me no time for recovery from the grandeur of its power and scope, before which I reeled in wonder and amazement. And the same is equally true of the present as it is of the past. So, again, this is what Spiritism teaches us. You are who you were when you come over. If you were generally a nice person, you were intellectually curious, you would still be the same way when you went to one of the levels of heaven. If you were a petty criminal and you were not a nice person and you thought bad thoughts about other people, and you probably ended up in the lower zone of the dark abyss. And guess what? You were with people about the same level. They treated you as you treated them. The lower zone and the dark abyss is the place where people go because they fit in there. It's almost the opposite of the golden rule, where you are treated as you treated others. Now, this is exactly how the spirit world helps repair and expose your own character and your attitude towards other people. They put you in a position of having that same attitude that you illustrated mirrored back into you. The same thing happens in our trials in life, where we had done wrongs in the past. Well, in our present life, because the spirit world tracks everything we've done in previous lives, in our present life, when someone, boyfriend or girlfriend, or husband or wife cheats on us or treats us terrible, it's a horrible divorce. Well, most probably that is because we had done the same to some other person in a past life. And now we get to feel what it was like. This is why when you have spirits obsessing and then you also just yourself, you have thoughts of wanting revenge. You have thoughts of, well, this is unfair. This person needs to be taught a lesson. And no, you don't need to teach anybody a lesson. Yes, it is, but it is good to think that it was unfair, because what you should realize is that you have done the same thing in the past, and therefore you should commit into the bottom of your heart not to do that to anybody now or in future, which you will remember. You'll have your instincts and your conscience with you in every life. And for the person that did that transgression, they will be taught, because in the Spiritism, you actually almost feel sorrier for the transgressor than the victim, because the victim got to check something off. They learned that lesson. They had to take the brunt, right? That was the reaction of their action in their past. But for the transgressor, right, the person who committed the wrong, that person will have a future awaiting them. Let me carry on. What then would have become of me if in the full flood of knowledge I have... Oh, let's answer this question while I read it. Let's say a person lived a life of crime in younger days and was a violent person, but as they got older, they changed their life to be a much nicer and kinder person. How will they be after death? They will still be a nicer and kinder person. And if they had tried their best to change their attitude and their character and to make amends for their younger days, they would have a lot less karma to pay for. So it's so you can pay off your wrongs in the same life that you committed them, and many do, and that would be a great thing. That's why sometimes for some people it's much better being caught and sent to prison so they can pay the price of their transgression than being scot-free, because they're going to end up paying the price sooner or later. So they might as well pay it now. So they will, if they're a much nicer and kinder person, they will be a much nicer and kinder person, and they may make it to heaven. And when they go to heaven, they'll feel terrible. They go, I can't believe I did all these wrong things. And people will talk to them, and they'll help them plan out their next life. And they'll probably try and tell that person, look, you made mistakes. Don't be too hard on yourself, and don't give yourself too difficult of trials. Because this is what spirits say, is that usually when people have really hard trials, not all the time, it's the person asks for them. It's again, over and over again, someone is the harsher judge on themselves than what would be done by their spirit mentors. What about a transgression related to mental disease? Now, a lot of that is forgiven. If you are truly being disabled mentally by obsession or some mental disease, um, that is not and I'm sure there's exceptions and there's other things going on, but as a general rule, if you had it's like a child um, throwing a stone and hitting a kid in the head, right? The child just going to do that, right? Child, and they didn't mean to, they just threw a rock in anger. It's not like a great crime or something like that. Again, this would be someone who did not mean to do that. They were delusional. It would probably, if they were being obsessed and they were given that delusion by other spirits, those other spirits would have to pay the price of that action, not the person who did that. The spirit world has perfect justice. That's why, when say, Jesus forgives and he forgives us all of it. And yes, Jesus forgives us, God forgives us, God loves us, but we all have to atone for what we did. But they don't, it's not like there's a law book. It's everything is looked at and everything is known. So there's perfect justice. So if someone did something under the influence of someone else, that person is not guilty of that transgression. And that's important to know. And again, everything is developed around the fact of improvement. They want us to improve. It's like teachers at a school. They don't want to fail students. They don't want students to not pay attention. They don't want students to get zeros and F's and D's on tests. They want students to succeed. They want us to succeed. And they try and create trials for us that are not beyond our capacity to deal with. And that's why whenever things get really bad and hard for you, they always tell you, look, in another week, another month, things will resolve themselves. There's no trial made that you will just be completely broken and destroyed. No, there's always interludes. There's always time to reflect. Okay, let me carry on. What then would have become of me if the full flood of the knowledge I have acquired, and let me assure you, I have been able to touch the merest fringe of that still to be attained, had broken over me like a thunderbolt at the moment when I opened my bewildered eyes upon the slope where I so unsuccessfully tried to answer the simple query, where am I? Be not deceived. God ever tempers the wind to the shorn lamb. He knows our frame and has ordained that our soul expansion shall proceed under conditions best suited to our state, which also tend to magnify his majesty and love. Again, the author said exactly what I just said. It's what is best for you. They understand each person individually. It's not like in our modern society where there's a set of rules, and even though there's all sorts of reasons why you had to violate that one rule, but because bureaucracy is the way it is, you had to be punished for it. No, that's not going to happen in the spirit world. Everything will be taken into account. Okay, I'll carry on. Knowledge can only be acquired as we have power to assimilate each successive phase of truth. It has no force, no life, no energy unless applied. And the man who tries to accumulate it without the correspondingly necessary strength to utilize the same, if successful, would only find he had gathered together and built an edifice which, for lack of support, would fall and crush him in its ruin. And again, this is very true. And I find that this is a good metaphor even for learning about Spiritism. Because when I first started learning about Spiritism, I read the Spirits book, I read the Gospel According to Spiritism, I read anything I could get on, and I intellectually understood it, but I didn't have it in my heart. I didn't have the charity and love. I'm still not where I want to be. I'm not saying I am, but I didn't feel it. I didn't grasp the emotional force of love and charity and fraternity that I intellectually knew it, but I didn't feel forgiveness like I should have. I didn't feel the love of other people, the love of people that even were to me more primitive, socially undesirable, let's say. And but the more you study and the more you read and the more you meditate and you pray, the more that will come to you. And of course, I'm sure a lot of people didn't have the hard time I had because you were probably a nicer person to begin with. I've never been, some people are born probably higher, more mature spirits, born with love of other people. I'm not that. I'm more of an introvert. I'm more of someone who thinks of ways to get things done, not worrying about people's feelings. And that made me somewhat successful in my younger days as getting things done. But then as I learned to get things done in a nicer, more benevolent manner, not to bully people around. But so that's just me. But I'm sure other people are much superior than I ever was. Okay. Where was okay? This strength to will, the weight of knowledge, can only come by steady growth, and therefore, if it were practicable to test the instantaneous explosive principle in the twinkling of an eye, in its expansion, it could never give the finite strength enough to grasp the infinite. This must be attained by the gradual transformation of our lives into the Christ life, which in turn must be converted into the infinite as we further expand into the likeness and character of God. And as I talk about myself for a second as being too stern, I think the Spirit World gave me examples. There was this wonderful minister we had, Episcopalian minister, Reverend I think Samuel. I just forgot his name. But he was just the nicest man ever. And in fact, when I was like 11 or 12, he was so nice that when I was in the pew with my mother, I would embarrass my parents because when he would come from the back of the church to go into the pew, I'd say, "Hey, Mom, God's coming." I thought he was God. That shows you what a concrete thinker I was. I was never a good student in church. In fact, I think after that, my mother, for some reason, never took me to church again. She also told me a story again as me being a concrete thinker when I was in one of the nursery schools, and they had this book, and in this book, they had here's an animal, and then they had a picture of Jesus and the animal. So that's Jesus and the animal, and here's something else, and that's Jesus in this animal, right? And at the last page, they had like one of these cheap little mirrors in the book. And I was like the last kid in a semicircle row, and the first kid said, "Oh, that's Jesus in me," because you're supposed to know that whatever picture you're seeing, that's Jesus in that picture. And they went, "Oh, Jesus in me, Jesus in me, Jesus in me." And they got to me, and my mother was there with some other teachers, teaching this class. And I said, "Oh, that's me." And I thought to myself, who are all these idiot people? Can't they look in the mirror and see who that is? Of course. Again, my mother was very embarrassed. And in fact, people said, "Oh, we feel sorry for you with a kind of a special needs kid." So I don't know why. I never had to go again. So anyway, that's just my story. Why, the Spirit World must have thought there's no way I was ever going to become a spiritist. They really had to hit me on the head for me to come and really think about is to get my head out of the material world and to get into the spirit world. And but that's what they do, right? I mean, because they do for me, I think they can do for anybody. Because I'm a hard case. I was a hard case. Okay, let me carry on. When we stand in close proximity to an overwhelming surprise, I have no doubt it is a perturbation caused and from which we have not had time to recover that leads us to suppose this last event to be the most momentous in our career. Some such idea as this took possession of myself as I gazed upon the inanimate form laying at my feet, with and which neither Kushna or Zena appeared anxious to disturb for a time. That's, I think her name was Maria, if I remember, and she had just kind of fainted after she told them kind of her life story of what I said at the beginning. I tried but vainly to reconcile the painful episode I had witnessed with the one law of love, which I had been assured held universal sway in this life. The problem was too deep, too complex for me to undertake, and at length I was reluctantly compelled to put it aside until I could gain some wider experience than my own to elucidate the mystery. So, and this is what we've seen in the wonderful books by Chico Xavier, The Spirit of Andre Louise. When you first give come into heaven, you say, "Oh, everything's full of love." And so now, if we just give love to everybody and help everybody out of their problem, that will solve the problem. But then more advanced spirits will say, "Slow down. You cannot solve problems for people." And the same thing is for here on Earth. If you have a partner or you have friends and they're just not ready to become spiritually aware now, or other things they may not become aware, you cannot force that. And if you try to force it, you don't really affect the foundation of their character. And again, this is what the higher spirit said. If you're trying to help that person right now, maybe they need the experience of coming through that trial and that problem themselves. And only if by doing it themselves and experiencing the full weight of their previous decisions and previous actions will they make the fundamental changes to their character and their attitude that is needed. You can be, it's like being a parent that does too much for their child. You've made a useless child, right? And it's hard, right? Because you want to do things for your child. You want to spoil your child. You don't want them to have to go through, harsh lessons, but they need to, right? Just like people everywhere. It's like our culture now is like, oh, if anyone's disturbed about anything, oh, they need to have their own safe space. Nonsense. The spirit world, the earth is not a safe space. The earth is a place to learn valuable lessons and to learn that you're going to have nonsense thrown at you. And if you don't like hearing it, well, you have to learn to filter it through your conscience. That's what we're here for, is to learn to filter everything, is to have all sorts of garbage and bad advice and bad inspiration thrown at us, and for us to say, nah, I don't think so. Because if you're closed to everything except that which makes you feel good, you're not learning and you're not rewiring your brain. So you have that fortitude and that character deep into your heart, that when you come to that moment and you're a higher spirit and you're helping whole races and cultures advance to some other planet, and you see all this chaos around you, you know what to do. Okay, let me carry on. Now is the time for waiting. See, okay. I think I went too far. While I was thus disturbed and perplexed, my two companions were calmly watching the unconscious Marie. Evidently, there would be something for them to do, but the period for action had not yet arrived. That's where you have to learn patience. Boy, is that hard. That was really hard for me, and that is one of the important things, learning patience, that I talk about in my book, How to Live uh, Inner Peace Through Spiritism. And that was one of the stanzas by Andre Luis in the poem he created of how to improve yourself. And patience is hard for a lot of us. Now was the time for waiting, and they did this in patience, calmly waited and watched, being perfectly ready for ministry when required. See, they didn't wake her up too early. They let the process go. When that moment came, with very tender care and sympathy, they performed the service so well understood, and before the tear-dimmed eyes were again open, we had resumed our journey, leaving the spiritual convalescent to the sole charge of that friend on whom she had learned to repose. I intended on my return to ask Kushna to give me time to study the action of these mysterious dews in changing the color of our dresses, to have thought for some explanation of his power in finding his way so unerringly through a trackless country, and a score of other matters which had suggested themselves to my mind. But now all were forgotten, and now I had but one desire, which at the earliest moment I laid before him. Kushna, tell me, How can you reconcile your one law of love with the terrible scene I just witnessed? Talking about all the misery that Marie went through, and she had a hard time because she'd done terrible things, and then she really, I think, punished herself when she went to the lower zones. And she goes, "I can well understand your difficulty," he replied, and this is important because this will show you why we have it the way it is on earth. This is why the earth, this is when God, people say, well, I don't believe in God because good people, bad things happen to good people and horrible people become rich and all of that. But let's see what he says. I can well understand your difficulty, he replied, and will try to explain it to you. Never forget that all life is a growth, a gradual transition from what we are to what we shall be by assimilating the influence of every experience through which we pass. Sudden changes are so in appearance only. Closer inspection will show they are all the effects of causes which have been working silently and unperceived they may be, and prepared developments which escape notice until forced upon our attention by some outward unfolding. All expansion works from the inner to the outer life, but we are naturally unable to admit the reality of anything which lies beyond the scope of observation. In nature, so there are things happening in people's character and people's thinking that you don't see. And when a person is punished, even though something terrible happens, even though they're a good person, that's all things that you can't see. And there's things that are going on inside that are helping them. And then when someone who becomes rich by cheating other people, that was a decision they made, and they will pay for that later. But that's all part of the process of transforming their insides. I carry on. In nature, we are not always accustomed to find sharp dividing lines. The darkest night rises by an imperceptible gradient into the glory of the cloudless morning. While it is very difficult for an inexperienced eye to decide at what moment the tide ceases to ebb and begins to flow. You cannot see the movement by which a flower unfolds its petals, yet the action is going on while your eyes are diligently watching. So it is with the spiritual life. It unfolds, never leaps. It flows like a stream, never bounds like an antelope. Its progress is a steady, silent advance, only evidenced to us as stages are reached. Such has been the career of Marie. It is impossible for me to relate or make you understand how or by what means she had been gradually weaned from the terrible agony in which I first found her, a remnant of what you have just witnessed. You will become acquainted with that in a more practical form when you find employment in a similar mission. Let me for the present be satisfied by indicating to you how there is nothing inconsistent with the law of love in asking her to tell her story. The retention of individuality demands that the memory of the past shall never be effaced. The scar of every wrong we have done will forever remain till when we have paid its penalty, it ceases to be a source of pain. The wound slowly heals as discomfort dies away, but the scar endures. So, right there, I think the key words here is the retention of individuality. And I have said this before. God does not want automatons, robots that are all programmed the same, and that we become individual people. We all this is a process that is mind-boggling. We become a perfect angel, a perfect spirit, meaning we have love and service and calmness and wisdom and knowledge about us. But we still retain our own individual personality. And that's what God wants. That's what Jesus wants. That's what every spirit around us wants. And in fact, spirits will say when they see very high spirits like Jesus or other high spirits, they say they see the love and then the experience, and they see the pain that person went through. It's written in their face. It makes them all different. And that's why we remember what we did wrong, but we forgive ourselves. It's like even in this physical life, especially as a kid, you do all sorts of things wrong, but then you forget about it. But again, you maybe not forget, but you've paid the penalty, and it's not a source of pain when you're a spirit because you have instant memory if you want. And that is really, this is why there are so many different types of personalities in the spirit world, because you go through who knows how many lives, thousands, maybe millions of lives, and each person takes different paths, right? Different probabilities of different paths, and everyone comes out somewhat different. But at the end, as you get higher and higher, you're still a nice person. You're still full of love. You're still extremely full of wisdom and knowledge, and yet you remain your individual self. That's that is the miracle. There is no such thing as miracle according to Spiritism, just things you don't understand. But that is just the amazing process of what we go through. I'll carry on. Marie has now reached this healing stage, and every time she tells her story is like another dressing of her wound, painful for the present, but beneficial in the result. Every recital is less agonizing than the last, and the exhaustion it causes induces a sleep from which she derives additional strength, which is very necessary to her progress. Without this, she would be content to remain as she is, in the lull of rest after the poignant anguish, without sufficient energy to prompt her to further progress. Therefore, what you have seen is but a wise provision to obliterate the past, and so far as the pain is concerned, and push her on to a happier condition than she at present enjoys. But could not that be attained by her talking of the past to Azina? No, he answered, not so effectively. Besides, such a course would be a waste of energy, which you will never find here. In that case, that is important. Thought is action in the spirit world. So, like in Star Wars, the replicator in Star Trek, right? You can create whatever you want from the replicator, but that doesn't mean you just sit there and go, "I want this, I want this, I want this," right? No, you're not going to have a waste of energy. They have unlimited resources, but they don't waste. Right? It's like you had a gallon of milk in the fridge and you didn't care if you spilled it. No, you husband that, even though you know you've got plenty in there. You carefully put it in a cup and put it back. You don't leave it out for it to go bad. You put it back in the refrigerator. Again, they don't waste energy. Everything is made to serve some useful purpose, and so you've learned what will be a valuable lesson by the present repetition. It has been helpful to others in the past and still will be when her story is told again. In this way, she becomes a powerful minister for good, while others are working for her salvation. Again, so far she has been limited to her one companion and must not be allowed to confine herself exclusively to Azina, or she'll never feel the need of other friendships. Every visitor she has tends to excite new interest, so that when Azina leaves her, as she will when the telling of her story does not occasion an aftersleep by its exhaustion, she will be so oppressed by her loneliness as to be forced from her retirement and find congenial society among those who are in somewhat happier condition than her present home. Again, this is so much truth coming out here. They know that when she tells her story, and if she doesn't go to sleep, she's ready for something else. But they let her figure that out. They let her say, "Hey, I'm kind of lonely here. Can I get out?" They don't say, "Marie, it's time for you to leave." No, they let you find out. And this is one of the answers why when people ask, well, why doesn't Jesus come or God come down to earth and say, "Hey, I'm God, everybody"? No. You've got to figure that out yourself. That's not going to happen. You'll be given signs and signals. You'll be given clues, but they're not going to give you the answer. They're not going to give her the answer. This is why prophets, when they talk to spirits, they think, "Oh, Jesus talked to me or God talked to me," and you hear this all the time, right? God talked to me. Well, no, spirits say God doesn't talk to humans on Earth. We're not advanced enough to even understand what that would be. But the spirits that is talking to you, not going to change your mind unless you say, "Okay, who really is talking to me?" Then they'll tell you. Unless they're a low spirit and they're faking, right? And then you got to read the medium's book to figure out what to do about those people. But a high spirit will not tell you what you thought was wrong. They'll let you figure it out. Besides, and you know that when you watch children, when they figure out something by themselves, it's there. It's there. If you tell them something, it may not be there forever, but when they figure it out for themselves, it's embedded in them. And the same thing for us. And that's what people don't understand, especially when prophets say, "This person talked to me," or "This is what I found in heaven." And I think about some of the things they say, and they're usually directionally correct. But some of the things I say, well, I don't think so. Of what I've read in Spiritism doesn't mean I'm right, right? And I respectfully, have a different opinion because I could be wrong too. But I say I'm not sure. But again, it's probably because they would not. They're not going to say, "Oh, no, you're wrong about that." No, no, they're not going to say that. They'll let you figure that out. Okay, I'm going to carry on. And how long will before all of this can be accomplished? And the answer is that varies very considerably, generally about the same length of time as the previous imprisonment. Have you any idea how long that was? Yes, have I told you, it lasts about 20 years. She was 20, poor Maria was 20 years in the lower zone. Oh, 20 years. He goes, oh, what a hell. What an experience. How I wish he could preach such a sermon in the ears of earth. My soul is longing to go back again and burn these revelations into my fellows. Oh, it is terrible to me to think how blind they are to these awful realities. I want them to know, to realize that nothing but lives, noble self-sacrificing lives and deeds can enter here to help in the determination of their future. I want to tell them that every wrong must be atoned for, and that by him who commits it, that there is no help, no escape, but every soul must work out its own salvation, and thus be instrumental in bringing about a reformation whose results will be the doing of the will of God on earth as it is done in heaven. The question: They say, what we keep to ourselves, we lose. What you give away, you keep forever. Is that storing treasure in heaven? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Is well, look, you can look at that in so many levels of what you just said. You can, you don't have to give all your money and all your material goods away and to people, but you can give your time and your consolation. You can give a shoulder to cry on, and you don't have to and this is one of my problems too, because I am not an extrovert, I'm an introvert. And sometimes it's like I have to force myself to get up and maybe answer emails or talk to people on the and I always like it when I do it. But again, it's my inner nature, which I'm trying to change, is it's kind of, be more within myself. And that is a loss for not only me, but for other people. And the more you give and the more you communicate and the more you help others, that is the true treasure, because that's what you're bringing to heaven. So no, you're absolutely correct. Okay, where was I? What? My companion made no attempt to interrupt me, but as he walked beside me, I could see a half amused, half regretful smile play across his face. And when I had finished, he replied in his gravely quiet tone. Okay, so he's probably amused because he knows this doesn't really work, right? He knows that some spirit comes and says, "You guys really need to refashion yourself," and they're going to go, "Yeah, we need to." And they'll last a half hour as they leave the church or whatever. And hey, I was the same way. That's why you really have to study, you have to read, you have to, and you have to fail, and you have to say, no, oh, like I failed today, and you have to analyze your behavior and your actions every day. Some days you won't, but I mean, I'm just saying you just need to keep. This is rewiring your brain and your personality and your character is not a one day decision. I'm going to be a better person. No, no, no. Maybe very superior people can do that. Not me. This has been decades long, and I had a long way to go, and I've still got a long way to go. Then he said, there are thousands, millions of friends who have been animated and swayed by the feelings which now move you. But when their opportunity has come and they proceeded to carry out their noble desires, they have found that which will yet be your own experience. In the first place, you will not be believed as to your identity. and will be called upon to fight a long and by no means complimentary battle to prove you are the messenger from this life. Next, having gained this point in the presence of a few, they will begin to demand from you numberless signs and wonders to strengthen this proof and gratify their curiosity. When you have succeeded in this and your heart is burning to begin your work, someone else will be brought in and they will demand that you shall go through the unwelcome process again for their gratification of the late newcomer. In fact, this is the normal condition in which they desire to circumscribe our work, and the greatest care is needed not to drive them away before you've attempted to sow some grain of truth. And this is exactly what happens, but this is where Spiritist centers are doing us a great service. They have Spiritist mediums who have been trained in Spiritism, and they will have Spiritist meetings that will happen at the same time, at the same day of the week. And those meetings will be protected by higher spirits, so only certain spirits can come and give them teachings and give them words of wisdom. And those words are always being brought out, and they'll have Spiritist mediums like Chico Xavier, who's passed away, bring us books from spirits that are, they psychograph, meaning they write what spirits tell them. Devaldo Franco, who's still alive and still psychographing books, giving us more information. And that's why there's a lot of information out there about Spiritism. Let me carry on. When you reach this effort, you will find that they will claim to know even more about this life than you yourself, and that you must be prepared for contradiction and correction in everything you say. While many of them will generously and frequently tell you that the error you are trying to teach savors very much of the realms of darkness because it is opposed to their teachings and beliefs. Let me advise you to not grow too enthusiastic over your anticipated mission to Earth. The great majority of mankind at present prefer to postpone any definite knowledge of this life until they arrive here, but I wish now to draw your attention to other experiences. So that was the end of that chapter. So, as we are talking about really understanding what is heaven and understanding what the spirit world is, the spirit realm, the spirit universes, the physical universes, and the dimensions within the physical universes, I suggest the first thing you do is, when I talked before, is to really get your outline of Spiritism 101, the third revelation. That gets you an idea. Read the Spirits book, type in Allan Kardec space PDF. You can download the Spirits book for free. Then when you're ready, get an idea of the true life you live and read my book, The Spirit Realm, Spiritism to Reveal the Reality of Our Existence. If you want to dive deeper into the spirit world and how it is, I would recommend you read my series of 3 books, starting with Heaven and Below, book 1 of Spiritism, The Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. This is based on a lot of the writings of the Reverend G. Owen. And what I do is I take what he writes, which he actually, a lot of the writings by Portuguese-speaking mediums are all about the lower levels of heaven and the processes we have here on earth. G. Owen really talked about the higher levels and other things. And so I would and so I take in what information is given from other Spiritist mediums and Spiritist authors, and also information I've learned from Spiritist meetings, I should say. And I back up what he said, and I try to explain it further. So book 1 is Heaven and Below, about heaven, Jesus Christ. And then book 2 is Spirits in the Spirit Universe, all about you as a spirit. What are you as a spirit? What are your attributes? What can you go through? How do you learn? How do you rise in heaven? These are all important things. What powers do you have? What powers do you have when you go down to the lower zone to help other people? These are all things I think people should understand, because once you understand what you really are in your mortal life, you are a spirit that's growing and maturing, then you'll understand why you're going through Earth, and then you'll understand why you're going through the boot camp. That's Earth, right? Earth is a place to really tear out these primitive emotions and replace those with advanced emotions. And then book 3 is how we are guided by spirits, how you are given the signs and signals, and then what's not only your future, but the future of Earth as a whole. So I want to say thanks for everyone coming today. And again, we have our, if you want to be notified of the live streams, please hit the bell, subscribe, and then hit the bell. And remember, we live stream every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. God bless everyone. God bless.